Without further ado, I'm really excited to introduce our first speaker. He's Paul Davidescu, and he's the Chief Eating Officer at Tangoo. That's a pretty awesome title there. Has three fun facts. So he calls himself a mutt because he is a Mexican Jew with grandparents born in Romania, Syria, Bulgaria, and Turkey. He sprints competitively on the U of T Masters track team. And he's within 50 days of hitting 1,000 straight days of meditation on Headspace. That's amazing. Paul, come on up here and share your fuck-ups.
Well, thanks for that awesome introduction, Marsha. Nice to see everyone. How's everyone doing? Woo! Couple things to start off with. I want to acknowledge the fact that it's in theme for me to fucking swear, and that's awesome. And secondly, I want to acknowledge all the familiar faces and friends that came out and supported tonight. I think that's really special. And I think having a community that supports failing forward is huge and very much needed, so thank you for being here. All right. Now, entrepreneurship and entrepreneurship are pretty fucking hard things to do. That's one thing. But to do that and to raise kids, that's really difficult. Any parents in the crowd? Couple? For the record, I do not have kids. That's me when I was a little boy. Me and my brother, we moved from Mexico City. Yeah, me in the front there. Now, the last permanent move that I had was from Vancouver to Toronto 7 months ago. And I really believe that movement is a key part of entrepreneurship. You always got to keep moving. You never know who you're going to meet, what opportunities come out, and what ideas come out of that. So I think it's really, really important. As far as my startup, it's been through a lot of movement, but it hasn't really been the traditional, up and to the right on the revenue curve. We've been all over. So throughout the journey, I guess we figured out a way to be in the face of death as a startup and use it as a quantum leap to level up. So for people in the crowd that are running an event company, hands up. What about running an app? What about a product? What about an agency? Those are all business models that we went through, so pay extra attention. So, V1, this is me in Barcelona. I went there on exchange. And talk about movement. When I moved there, I was really inspired by the city, like what an incredible city. And the course I took, brand management, is kind of an interesting one. They gave you real money. Like they gave you 500 euros and they said, hey, here's some money. Learn the theory of brand management, put it on a product, go sell it, and your letter grade depends on how well you do. No pressure. Go have fun. And at first, I'm like, well, and they only taught us about brand management, nothing about products. So they told us it doesn't really matter what your product is. It matters what your brand stance is, how you're making the world a better place. And so with us, we thought about, well, nowadays, and this is, I guess, in 2010, but still, nowadays, people aren't as connected as they used to be. They're more connected, but offline, they're not really communicating. They're not really, co-creating. They're not really, again, intimately connecting like a tango dance. Any dancers in the crowd? Right, so in a tango dance, you move in a meaningful way. You're present with each other, and I feel like that's lacking now. We said, that's going to be our brand stance. And we thought of building, launching a wristband and watch company where if you put the wristband and the watch together, it signaled infinite connection. I know, super cheesy, right? But that's what we did. We got an A, but unfortunately, after the exchange was over, the founding team had to disintegrate and go back to the corners of the earth. So unfortunately, we couldn't keep it going. And we also didn't really have Shopify available as it is now. So unfortunately, couldn't continue the watch company and moved back to Vancouver. And by the way, those are not meant to be blurred out. No one's naked. That's actually a photo of me and my co-founders, one of them being from Daily Hive. And when I moved back, they said to me, Paul, we want to create a company that gets people off our website and connecting in the city. Breaking bread and getting off the forums and really connecting. So I thought to myself, well, I'm pretty passionate about connecting people offline. as if they're dancing. And after all, didn't Fuckup Night start over breaking bread and having some mezcal? So I was excited about that. That photo's from our first night that we launched. And the morning after, I get an email from Global TV. They saw someone's tweet. Go figure. And it was my first time being on TV. Like, we wanted to come in on Saturday morning. So I go on Saturday morning, I do the TV thing, and then it's CTV that calls me the week after that. And then the Globe and Mail, and then something about media is that once you kind of get out there, the rest of them sort of want to talk to you, assuming they like what you're doing. And what our startup was, by the way, we called it a resto cocktail hop. Basically, you go to 3 restaurants in one night, you pay once, and the night's taken care of. Think of it like a fancy adult pub crawl. So that was the idea. And the fuck up here actually was that, or the imminent fuck up was, we were so blinded by the media attention, getting social proof, yeah, we're on TV, that when we looked at our balance sheet, it was definitely in the red. Definitely in the red. We weren't making enough money. It wasn't scalable. There wasn't any ROI. There wasn't any ROE, which my friend Stev coins as return on effort, which I think makes so much sense. So this never really clicked for us. And it clicked for me 24 hours before probably the biggest pitch of my life. It was at our co-working spot, Launch Academy in Vancouver. And it was in front of 300 investors, startup founders, and media. And there's something about knowing that's going to be your pitch the next day where you ask yourself the hard questions. You take the red pill. And you think to yourself, am I really confident with this, or have I just been blinded by something else? So sure enough, when I realized this, my team had gone home for the day, and I was still working on my deck. And I was lucky enough to have a couple fellow founders staying out late as well. And we basically started to rewrite the entire business plan. We kind of thought to ourselves, what was one thing we learned from a year and a half of doing these events? What we realized is that people went there because they wanted a hassle-free night. They didn't want to plan. My vision for it, by the way, is that there's 30 people on these events, so it's about meeting other people. But that wasn't why they used the product. They wanted a seamless way to plan their night out. So we thought to ourselves, we don't have to be an event company. We got to be in their pocket. And that's when Songza was popular before they got acquired. And we thought of making the Songza for restaurant discovery. And we literally put it on the back of a napkin. We put it on a PowerPoint, and we pitched it the next day. And people knew what our business model had been, so people were pretty fucking confused, to say the least. So was my team, actually. Yeah. And when they started to announce the winners, I guess the slide kind of gave it away. We actually won. We won demo day, which was pretty ridiculous. It was, I think, a very exciting day in our lives. And off we went to build a multi-billion-dollar tech company. So as the champagne poured, so did the checks, the investor checks. That's our first investor check. Very exciting. And, the first check we got, we're like, this will definitely take care of team of 8, new office, swag. All $20,000 of it. Let's just say we had to raise money pretty quickly after that. So we raised $100,000. And to cap it all off, we were informed that we had made it on audition for Dragon's Den. So, fast forward to Dragon's Den. A lot going on here. I'll start with the most exciting part. And that's Arlene Dickinson and Michael Weckerly having a pretty intimate makeout. We did a demo where they were dating and using our app. And they made out. And if you watch the video, you'll see me fist bumping because I knew that was going to get us aired no matter what happened. And that was the plan, right? It's for the marketing, right? 1 million Canadians watched the show. The reason why I'm not so impressed in that photo is because most of them turned us down. They said we were too early. Arlene kind of lowballed us, and we're like, nope, we're not going to go for that. So we didn't get a deal, and that was a little disappointing. And after that, we were a little bit, shaken up. But we said, you know what? If we air, there's 1 million Canadians, and they're bound to download the app. This is a pretty freaking cool app. So that was our prediction. And for those who can't read, that's 1,000 downloads. The math is that's 0.1% of Canada downloaded our app, which was fucking disappointing. We didn't go viral, and the worst part for those building an app, it's not about your downloads, it's about your monthly active users. Are people actually using it? So again, the media, the Dragon's Den, it had us really on our high horse. And then when I looked at some basic stats online, it says that 73% of us, our app usage time is on 3 apps. WhatsApp, Instagram, Google Maps. And guess what? That's also where you find out restaurant recommendations. So we were double fucked. Like really double fucked. So just as vividly as I remember walking to CBC Studio at like 6 a.m. for our pitch, I remember walking to my office at around the same time back in Vancouver, and this is when I got approached by my founder, the Thor-looking guy on Dragon's Den, big blonde guy, and this is the guy who was basically a co-founder of me. His parents invested in our startup, and he said, "Paul, I can't do this, man. Got to pay my rent. I got to go." That was it. And then, I don't know, an hour later, another staff says, "Paul, I got a job offer. I can't tell you where. Got to go." I mean, we were basically out of money, so I can't really hold it against him, but that's what happened. I remember just sitting there by myself, thinking about what had happened in the last 6 months, year, and now this was basically, I guess, what they call rock bottom. And after this, I mean, that was it. We were back up against the wall. The people who stuck around were a couple of the developers to see if we can give it some last life. And we went back to school. We went back to UBC. We found a basement where there was no rent, and we were going to revive our app somehow. And again, I talked about this theme of movement, because when we were at UBC, we noticed a lot of what we now call influencers, aka bored students who have lots of money and go out and take photos of food. But it turns out that in 2015, this was actually a growing thing, and of course today it's quite big. And we realized that if you add up all of their followers in aggregate, and these, by the way, these are influencers who curated lists on our app. So we already had their relationships. When you add up their followers, they had 100 times more users than us. Not to mention, people were on Instagram 32 minutes a day. That's a stat. So we said, okay, so we can either keep building this billion-dollar tech company and one day be a data company and see where that goes, or we can listen to what our customers want. Those are the restaurants. They want bums and seats. They want revenue. They want eyeballs. And our app wasn't doing that. So this is like a moment of truth, right? Swallow your pride and go where the market wants to go. Who would have thought? So we started building an influencer marketing company. And also this is a time where we had to reposition our why. Remember our why? It was bringing people together. And this started with, of course, patrons. But we had to evolve them. We said, you know what? We're actually really passionate about bringing together entrepreneurs, the restaurants, our influencers, and ourselves. And that's where our why evolved, and that's when it just felt a lot more right. I call that product founder fit. So we do that, and of course, 6 months later, we realized influencers aren't quite enough to drive revenue. But by this point, we had kind of we let go of our pride and we're like, whatever the market wants, we're gonna go with it. So we started doing social media management, then we started doing paid acquisition, just trying to prove more and more return on investment. And then we realized that there are other customers who also want new revenue, mortgage brokers or SaaS companies, and that's kind of where our agency has evolved to today. And so final thought, so what is that formula when you're about to get fucked as a startup? How do you take that quantum leap? So to summarize it, first it's the why. Why are you doing it? What I learned in the classroom, believe it or not, it still stands true. It's build a why and the product will follow. And there's no way you can see that till you live it. And you really got to be passionate enough to actually get through it and have that grit. Secondly, I never really had full team commitment for various reasons. You got to find people that are really aligned with your why and are going to be there, honestly, as long as possible. And they're going to be fired up and they're going to be okay with evolving. And the last one is you got to be ready to pivot. You really got to be ready to pivot and understand that within what you've done right now, even if the business model makes absolutely no sense, There is one kernel of gold, one insight you can take on to your next model. So stay in your sandbox. That's really important. And I guess probably the biggest takeaway, at least for me, that's me on my scooter. 2001 Razor scooter, and this is when I was back in Vancouver. And this was a day where I said, I don't give a fuck how I look. I'm going to get from point A to point B, and that's what I'm going to do. And I think having that as a parallel to my entrepreneurial journey, I was very focused on looking good with my startup, right? Sexy business models, building an app. But at the end of the day, that didn't really serve me. Instead of making yourself look good, what about if you focus on making your customers look good? You'll be a lot more fucking successful. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that story, Paul. I think out of all of our speakers that we've had, that was the most amount of pivots that somebody has shared. And there's such a great lesson in there that always just keep on moving and just keep evolving. So thank you so much again for sharing that. And let's open it up to Q&A. So now's your chance to ask Paul some questions. And just something to keep in mind as you ask the questions, keep the question itself brief, just so we can get through as many as possible. Thanks.
My answers are not concise.
No, not for people asking the questions.
Hey, Paul.
Hey, Paul.
Lots of pivots. Did you ever find that when you pivoted, it was the wrong move and you had to go back to where you were to then, or like you learned a lesson and you went back to where you were and suddenly it worked? Or was it always moving forward?
I mean, you definitely take a lot of, one step back, two steps forward kind of thing. But like in my examples, I mean, here's the thing. I didn't really accept that that the model was wrong till it was like totally like conclusive. And I wish I would have had a bit more foresight to be like, yeah, my gut says it's wrong. I should probably start pivoting rather than if I didn't pivot, I was like, the startup was dead. I feel like that made me move a lot slower. But it's a tough balance. I think it's a thing about looking at the objective data and then looking at your gut and talking to your team, right? So there's no kind of one answer, but I know you guys have an awesome startup, Neo Retreats. You should definitely pitch it after. And you guys have a great thing going on for wellness, and you're only 2 events in, so I definitely think that you'll know kind of where the market's going. At the end of the day, be sure to look at your revenue at some point. But event companies are tougher because it takes longer to build up, but end of the day, money does not lie, and I think it's really important to be a realist versus short-term game and long-term game. Does that help? Thanks. You guys picking? Or?
Here. Okay. Thank you.
Yes,
Hi.
I got you. Sorry, lights in my eyes.
Yeah, listen, great speech. I just wanted to ask you, could you elaborate a little bit on your Dragon's Den deal and why you chose not to take that money eventually?
Yes, good question. I don't know. Watching Dragon's Den, I find that a lot of entrepreneurs, they kind of sell themselves short. And I feel like when you're on TV and there's pressure on you, there's all these big dragons there, and you really want to please them. I find they really abuse a lot of startups, and I feel like some startups go up there as if it's do or die. If I don't get investment, that's it. Why even go up? And for some gizmos and gadgets, maybe, but we didn't want to sell ourselves short. And a little side story is that after the show, one of the dragons, Vikram Vij, celebrity chef, he's got a restaurant in Vancouver. So we actually went to his restaurant after, and we're like, hey, lights are off, cameras are off, let's talk real business. And we got him to invest in our startup at our valuation in the end, which was super awesome. So yeah, it turned out pretty well, but basically I think you just got to go up there and really defend your value, because they're not the only investors out there, and I'm sorry, but they're not always the most relevant and smart investors for your specific vertical, right? So you really got to be conscious of that. And again, the marketing is an important part, but I think the best part of the experience was the personal development of every Friday leading up to the pitch at 6 a.m. we had to pitch in front of our advisors, and we nailed their pitch because we practiced a shitload. And it's cool to I feel like the journey is the best part of that. That's a long answer to your short question. Hopefully that helped. Okay, thank you.
Hi.
Hi. What's your name?
David.
Nice to meet you.
You talked a little bit at the beginning about how you got caught up in the fame a little bit and how that maybe distracted you from your overall goal. Can you elaborate a bit on that and how that kind of messed you up in the beginning?
So there's a lot of me talking about the event company to the app, or
CBC, like the CBC
Yeah.
thing, and how that in particular.
Yeah, for sure. So like, I don't know. My vision was that like I thought it was a pretty damn cool event. It makes a lot of sense, and we sold out, which was like 30 or 50 people, and I don't know. We were making $20 a head, and I just had my pro forma, right? I'm like, well, if I then create a franchise and have different people running Tangoo nights all over the world, well, hell, we'll make a lot of money. But the key thing is that there wasn't stickiness, and stickiness means that no matter what your company is, if people aren't coming back within 3 months even, right? So whether it's on your app, you're logging in once every 3 months, or an event coming once a quarter, like that's not enough for it to be sustainable, because it's a lot harder. It's more costly to acquire a new user than an existing one, right? That's the first thing. And eventually needs some inherent virality. Like people, like the word of mouth has to spread more. And we were still working really hard to do it, but we were kind of like hoping for too long until like we realized, man, this thing isn't moving, right? So you kind of got to make a pretty bold sort of prediction of, or you have to set a bit of a target where like, hey, if we don't get here, we either have to pivot or we've got to make big changes. And we just kept getting media exposure. So it was getting external reinforcement that didn't mean shit. It was just for them to get eyeballs on their business. Nothing to do with how good our idea was. So it's like, be real with the numbers and the metrics that matter for your startup. Talk to people in your vertical. There's lots of people here who are running events or doing apps, and ask, like, what does success look like for you? As an app, like, when do you get funded? How many users do you have to do? I didn't do a lot of primary research. I went too much off my gut, but guess what? My first time running a company like that, so my gut was wildly off in many ways. So I regret not being more of a realist and talking to more people who have definitely fucked up. In fact, if I would have known about Fuckup Nights, I probably would have gone to a bunch of those, and it probably would have helped me out. But wasn't a thing in Vancouver, unfortunately. Did that help answer your question? Thanks, brother.
Paul, thanks for sharing your story. So
Thanks
out
for
of
listening.
curiosity, when you're talking about your pivots and how you were too determined, I view it as that's great perseverance, right?
Mm-hmm.
And of course, I think it's a double-edged sword. So if you were to, go back and redo this again, would it just be exactly what you said, talking to more people within your vertical specifically, and identify their mistakes so you don't avoid it, or would there be other things that you change?
Yeah, I think the first thing is definitely talking to more people who've just been in the trenches, for sure, right? Especially, and there were a lot of other similar kind of apps which I saw as competitors. I'm like, I'm not going to talk to them. I want to share my crazy IP that I've been building on my Discovery app. So yeah, and I think it's talk to your competitors, and I think nowadays people are open enough and they realize that you're better off learning from someone and maybe telling them kind of your secret versus being oblivious to it and then just wasting time and money. So yeah, I would talk to people in my industry, competitors, look at some basic stats out there. There's some really well calculated stats like app usage. Like if I would have seen that stat, I don't think I would have continued my startup. But I think you have to be a little bit, like ignorance is bliss, right? So I think it's a mixture of your gut and determination, but also like be a realist. Because what you've done is probably not that unique. There's been someone who's done a similar business model, and you got to just like take the red pill, and you can't be attached to your idea. I think that's a big thing too, because end of the day, like simple up in economics, you have to see like what's been done. So it's a balance. If you go the other direction where you just listen to what everyone says, you can be very confused and very dizzy. So it's a balance, but do your research and just know that you will get into a better business model, but it's really about your why. Like, what's the thing you're trying to solve? What's the problem you're trying to solve? I think it's really big. And that was the one thing that I guess at least gave us the energy to kind of build through it. But yeah, I feel like where we are now, I could have figured out way faster. Does that help? Are you building a startup now, or
Yes.
what kind of startup?
It's a sports bra company.
Sports bra company.
Yes.
Okay. So being from Vancouver and the fitness apparel capital of the world, I've got some connections for you, so come talk to me after.
Great. Thank
Awesome.
you.
Thanks for the question.
Thanks, Paul.
Okay, so we'll do one more question, if there is another one, and
Got
then
one
we'll
here.
cap it off.
Hi, great
Hey,
talk. Thank
thanks
you
so much.
for that. Thank you for sharing. It was very, very helpful. You mentioned something called product founder fit.
Yes.
Could you maybe explain that a little bit more, and also talk about like how would you diagnose that?
It's a lot of introspection. Basically, when we were building an app, very scalable, and I think apps are great if you do it correctly. I was never a technical founder, nor did I really care to be one. And end of the day, like I get my energy from people. Like when we were doing those events, as unscalable as they were, I loved it. I'm like, yes, this is me. I needed that kind of creative energy with my customers, and I had to kind of be there physically with them. When we were building an app, I really felt like it was like, hey, developers, is that product, if that part of the product built it, is that bug fixed? I just kind of like following up with them, and I couldn't really do anything. Like we were literally, like we would have a prototype of our app, and we'd be pitching people on the bus well before our app was even in the App Store, which is kind of cool. You get a lot of good feedback, but like I felt like a caged animal. I couldn't really be creative and do what I want to do, right? So I think like you just have to think about like what do I love to do and what am I best to do? Let's be honest. You know, I sell, I market, I hire. I'm not a developer. So I think when we got to be an agency, it allowed us to get more offline, right, and co-create and do things that we want to do. So you really got to be honest with yourself: is where are your strengths, and are you living it right now? And if not, have a co-founder who's gonna round you out. That's really important. Does that help?
Yeah, thank you.
Awesome. Thanks for the question. Thanks everyone. Appreciate it.
Perfect.
And good luck to the speakers.
Thanks, Paul.